Good day and welcome to this Customer Experience webinar hosted by QuestionPro and presented by myself, Craig Lee, a Customer Experience Advisor and Strategist based in Dubai. The topic for today is really talking about customer experience, what it means, what it is, what it isn't, and I'm going to put specific emphasis on touch points, on mapping, and give some examples of effective measurement. This should help us set the scene for customer experience, and over the next 40 minutes I'll be able to share with you a number of examples around bringing your customer experience to life in your companies, whether you're in HR, whether you're in finance, whether you're in market research, operations, customer service, or anywhere else in the business. This will be really useful to you because for customer experience to work, it all has to work. A little bit about our hosts this afternoon, and that's QuestionPro. They've been world leaders in survey solutions for a long time and have a presence in more than 100 countries around the world. You can see a really good footprint here. They also work with a number of partners, some of which are being shown on the screen right now. These are all people who really care about getting the views and insights of their staff and their customers, and QuestionPro helps them do that. It's a great privilege to be here this afternoon and to share some insights with you. And I'd strongly advise, if you haven't looked at the QuestionPro website, to please do so, because they can offer you a number of different comprehensive solutions, all sitting on one platform. What's particularly important is the feedback component that we get through customer experience. Customer retention, loyalty, and of course all the growth that goes with that only comes from comprehensive insights. And more importantly, insights that can be actioned, because actionable insights is where the real value in our business sits today. Of course, they'd look at other solutions as well, especially around the workforce, being able to bring workforce intelligence together, bring these customer insights directly into things so that workforce is actually proactive and able to respond to customers' issues quickly. And of course, together with all of that is to create communities, sometimes with your customer base, but more importantly, with your employee base. So today what I'd like to talk about is give you some overview of what customer experience is, what it isn't. So I'd like to say right up front, customer experience is not customer service. So often I hear these two terms being used together. Customer experience is a transformation mindset. It's a way of looking at the business by putting the customer more at the center of what we do and how we do it. And it's really important that we start, for companies who are ready to embark on a customer-centric approach, is to start putting the customer and certainly customer thinking at the front end. I'll also spend a little bit of time showing you how we build a bit of a financial case for customer experience. It's not just that soft, fluffy stuff that the marketing department does. There is real sound evidence, and there's more and more research being done on those companies that are focusing on customer experience make more money. You can start with customer experience almost at any stage. Some people start with technology, some start with insights, others start fixing some parts of their customer service. So I'll talk about 4 different tracks of possibly where to start. There's no cookie cutter approach because each company is different. So I wish we could say we start with vision and we end with implementation. It doesn't always work like that, and different companies are on different tracks. We also need to really pulse how we're doing, what to watch out for, how to fast track certain things and put our efforts into what really matters. And so mapping will really help us understand that, and mapping in itself also helps us start to put together a roadmap of how to do things. And constantly in this changing world we're working in, we're trying to find quick wins. We're trying to find things that can show and demonstrate to people inside the organization, if we focus on these things, we can move the customer experience agenda forward faster. And then, of course, we also want to make sure that we constantly find ways of getting buy-in and moving ahead with that. So what is customer experience? A quick definition of customer experience is that it's a blend of a company's rational performance, in other words, what it does transactionally, and all the emotions that are evolved and evoked with those customers across every touch point. Now, what I really mean by that is it's how you feel about what's happening to you when a company's doing it to you. How do you feel about using the website? How do you feel about the way somebody talks to you in a store? How do you feel about the way you are treated? Now, so much of what we discuss in customer experience is sometimes way out of what companies believe their role is. So think of going to visit your bank, and you arrive there and you park, and there's a big sign saying the chairman's parking's right outside the front door of the bank. That gives you an immediate impression of how important you are as a customer. The second thing is you're going to be met by a security guard who is probably a third-party security guard, and you're going to ask for directions in the bank, and invariably the security guard won't know, but he's your first brand experience with the bank. So we start to build up perceptions and have our certain emotions evoked right from the very start, even when you maybe as a customer or as a company don't see that as being part of your experience, and certainly not part of your designed experience. So very often we are having emotions about the way in which people talk to us, about the language they use, about how they do specific things, about what they want me to do when I really feel they should be doing it, etc., etc. These are very important elements for us to understand, that what a company like a UPS, for example, can be brilliant at delivering parcels. But if those parcels aren't delivered in a way that suits you, then it doesn't help. So when we think about experiences, we've got to think about how they don't just happen by chance. Companies that get this right, like Disney, they design every single element of their experience. These experiences don't just happen by accident. And for us to understand that, we really need to understand about the whole ecosystem. So if we want to go from A to B as a customer, the role of the company is to tidy that up so I can move from A to B as quickly as possible, as seamlessly as possible, as joined up as possible. That's what I call on stage. But we've got to be really cognizant of what's also happening backstage, because I can only deliver online in a certain way. I can only deliver to the customer if the technology is right, if I understand how the brand has to present itself, if the organization works across silos very, very well, if I have a customer experience strategy, if the data is actually producing insights that I can use at each one of those touch points to make my customer's experience fantastic. And very importantly, in today's environment, how inspirational is the leadership? Who is leading the customer experience effort? Who is putting the customer at the front of the business? And how are the various teams in HR, in finance, in ops, etc., being led, being driven to deliver fantastic experiences, designed, orchestrated, and deliberate. Now, when we think of a quick model of customer experience, we think about the time it takes to do something along the bottom axis, and we talk about the quality of the customer experience. Now, many companies we're dealing with we'll find are really in the fix-it stage. These are companies that are working to fix things, quick fixes, etc. Once we've done that, and many companies have started to move into the standardization phase, where we can have really functionally driven, very tactical things that are happening, that is also great. It moves the customer experience up. It's helping to standardize certain things. But we don't really get the full financial benefits and kick in of the optimization of customer experience until such time as we're able to take a lot of standardized things. Because only once we can do that can we move through the maturity stages of the experience to enhance that. So there is a specific plan on how you move from fixed to standardized to optimize to finally embed things where everybody in your business thinks customer experience across the entire experience. Because only really then that we start to get the full benefit and impact of customer experience and its true impact on the business. So when we're making the change for the case for why experience matters, it might be useful to look at this. About 4 or 5 years ago now, Standard & Poor's did a whole range of experimentation. What they first did is Forrester did some research on who the customer experience leaders were in the top 500 companies, who the people were that weren't doing so well, and who the laggards were. They then gave that data across to Watermark Consulting, and Watermark took that information and threw it against the financial performance of those top 500. The surprising result of that was that those companies that were focusing on customer experience and indeed leading customer experience outperformed others by almost 43%. So if we want a case for a focus on customer experience having a financial impact, this goes a long way to help you do that. Laggards, on the other hand, underperformed by almost 33%. There's a lot of additional research that can be brought to the fore now, and a lot more work has been done in the area of ROI and the effectiveness of customer experience focus. Another one I quite like is this idea about being customer-centric. When I speak to a lot of my customers and a lot of my clients, they talk about companies being customer-centric. And you'll sit in front of the board and say, do you think we're customer-centric? And the board says, absolutely we are. We're doing this for the customer, that for the customer. So the CMO Council did an affinity study a few years ago, and they went out and said, do you think you're customer-centric? And 56% of the respondents, all companies, responded and said, yes, we're customer-centric. They then said, do you mind if we go and ask your customers that? And unfortunately, when they asked the customers of those people, only 12% of customers thought that those companies were customer-centric. So let's be very clear. When we're looking from the inside out, from within our companies outwards, we think we're pretty marvelous. When our customers are looking at us, they don't think we're that pretty. And we need to really keep that in mind if we're driving a customer-centric view. It really, really matters what our customers think, feel, and do. Because some interesting stats to consider is that it's 6 to 7 times more expensive for companies to attract customers than keep existing ones. 85% of customer churn is researched to be against poor service. So imagine if we could just do something about poor service. Imagine if we could just give more insight and data to somebody in the front line to be able to keep a customer. 85% of churn is because of poor service. 11% of customer churn could actually be absolutely prevented by just simply reaching out and saying sorry proactively. And companies like QuestionPro give you that great advantage of being able to constantly pulse what your customers are thinking and who's possibly going to churn. And 67% of customer churn is preventable if the issue is resolved the first time, regardless of the channel that you're working on. So we do know that if we fix some of these things, we can keep customers longer and make more money. So where do we start? All I've shown you so far is complexity, but actually it doesn't have to be. When you Google something like customer experience, this is what you get on a Wordle. You get everything from employees to vision to focus to strategy to this big thing called CX to customer service. Well, yep, as I've shown you already, it's all of that. So in this minefield, where do we start? At Tribe CX, we say it's a journey. And it doesn't matter where you are on the journey, get on the journey, start. And for those of you who have started and feel a little bit stuck, that's also not a difficult place to be. There are times when we embark on things and suddenly we feel we're in too deep or nothing's working for us. And customer experience practitioners know how difficult this is because they've got to join the dots. And Tribe CX is there to help exactly those practitioners manage their way across this journey. Ideally, we'd love to start with a strategy and vision, then start to change the culture, and then start to do a whole lot of things. But in reality, there are a whole lot of things that are broken. And we tend very practically to start with those things first, and then realize maybe we need a bit of strategy, maybe we need to invest a little bit more in changing our culture. Oh, and we don't know much about our customers or our people, so we'd better get into understanding and getting a bit more feedback and learning. So remember, it's a journey, and it doesn't really matter where you start, just be on the journey. One of the ways Tribe would start is with a benchmark assessment, finding out, where you sit on various dimensions in terms of your vision, in terms of how you think and how you learn and how you fix things and how customer-centric you are. This, like many other benchmarks, gives you a quick pulse of where you sit vis-a-vis each other in your own business. But of course, there's also a great opportunity to see where other companies are on that same journey and where you might be lagging or ahead. And remember, there is no cookie cutter approach. So we're all at different stages of the journey. One of my opportunities in my past life was working with Emirates Airlines in an incredibly dynamic growth phase of the airline. And customer experience and customer focus, absolutely critical to bringing that brand to life, right from its inception right through to where it is today. And 5 very quick top-line views of that Emirates journey and getting onto the customer experience approach that eventually was driven into many parts of the business to create an ecosystem of customer thinking first, can be summed up in these 5 bullets. So the first thing is, how do you think? What's your strategy? What business are you really in? That becomes very, very important. Why do you want to have the best airline food? No, that's not what your customers want, because those same customers are staying at 5-star hotels around the world. They're having fine dining at fantastic restaurants around the world. So why would you want to have the best airline food? How you think should be how you're going to be the best restaurant at 35,000 feet. So your strategy and your thinking shapes where you need to go. That's why it's really interesting to see that many companies now baseline and benchmark themselves outside of their sector. You want to be a hotel that operates like Uber. You want to be an Airbnb that operates like a telco. You want to be able to benchmark outside your sector. The second bullet that's really important is we really need to understand what is valued. And if I talk about that for a brief second in customer experience terms, what is valued by you as a business might be the number of widgets you sell and the bottom line and how well you're doing and how much profit you make. What is valued by your customers is the consistency of their experience, the fact that they can trust you, and the fact that you are delivering the value that they need for that price. So it's not always about price. It's about packaging stuff in so that it is of value to the customer. You won't determine that. The customer will. The customer will tell you what is valued and what is not. So it's really important we sit on both sides of the camp on this one to understand what value looks like. And there's a lot of stuff we can do around that. The third thing is that the context of what your business is, who you want to be, where you want to be in the next 5 years, how you're going to get there. By explaining the context of your business, empowers everybody to help deliver that. What I'm challenging here is siloed thinking. You can only think about finance in the finance department. You can only think about customer service in the call center. We are all, if we understand what the whole system has to deliver to the customer, we all find ways of being empowered to deliver that. The fourth thing, and especially for companies like Emirates and the other major brands, everybody wants to have an impact in terms of what their brand stands for and the value of that brand. And how do we leverage that brand? Well, how does your brand talk on the phone? Is it the same way that you send emails to each other? Does it feel like a WhatsApp message? What does your company smell like? What does your company feel like? All of those things are linked to the brand. And if there's an inconsistency, in other words, if your brand speaks like an old person and only employs young people and you overscript your call center, nobody believes you. So we can't say we're ultra-modern on the one side and be really old on the other side because one channel is doing something in a specific way. So we've got to see the brand as being something that has to be leveraged in the way we talk, the way we look, the way we smell, the way we walk, the way we respond, all those things together. And then finally, it's also about constantly keeping your eyes on, constantly looking, listening, connecting, understanding, and proactively responding to customers. The more we know how you feel, the more we know how your customers feel, the greater the probability is that we can connect with them. The more we can connect with them, the more they're going to tell us. And the more they're going to tell us, the more they're going to say, don't play with that because we really like that. And if you change that, we're not going to like you anymore. And if you're doing things that customers don't like, they're going to tell you that too. So if you're going to deliver a great experience, this comes from a book called Exceptional Service, Exceptional Profit. And the experience of a great DNA is a perfect product. In other words, well designed, does what it says in the box. A bit like opening an Apple iPhone out of the box for the first time. You don't expect it to be flawed. It's even charged. It's ready to roll. You don't have to load anything. Delivered by very caring people. In other words, your people need to understand the context of what you're trying to deliver. Can you imagine getting an Apple iPhone out of a scratchy box and it's sort of half packed and it's thrown at you by somebody across a cash counter? Perfect product, not delivered by caring people. It has to be delivered in a timely fashion. In other words, it has to be delivered when you need it delivered. It's pointless getting somebody really excited about something and then underperforming on the delivery of it. You know, go to your favorite restaurant, everybody else gets served with a starter, and before you finished your starters, the main course arrives. Perfect product, probably come out of the kitchen in a good way, delivered by caring people. The waiters and waitresses aren't bad in their delivery, but the timing is all wrong, and it affects your overall experience. And then finally, when things go wrong, and I think this is the key takeout, if anything is remembered out of this entire webinar this afternoon, if anything is remembered is if something goes wrong, how proactive are we at fixing it? We design most of our experiences to deal with things to go perfectly well. However, we all know in all of our businesses, there are always 3 or 4 things consistently that will go wrong. And it is today really bad if we leave our frontline staff absolutely dangling, where they have to ask supervisors permissions and all sorts of other things when something goes wrong, and we know it goes wrong 40 times a shift every single day of the week. So, if you want to surprise and delight a customer, really focus on those things that go wrong regularly and make that experience so exceptional that your customer is bowled over, is absolutely wowed by the experience, because it's something that they least expect at that point in their journey. And if we look at internally around customer experience, we should think that everything happens in the business can be reduced to two functions. You're either serving the customer or you're serving the people who serve the customer. And so few businesses are truly set up in that way. Does the finance department help the front line? Does HR help the front line? Does the front line have to help the customer? So everything we do should be either helping somebody who serves the customer or serving the customer really well. And to do this, we've got to get both sides of our worlds together. As I said already, we can't have a different experience on the outside and then find that the inside world and the inside culture is so punitive that the people could never deliver what's expected on the outside in the brand experience, because we're not giving them that experience internally. So we've got to start with the inside and make sure that we get that right. And one last comment really about structuring for customer experience is customer experience is a competence, I should say. It's not a function. So if you are starting off on this path, try not to set up a big department in your company that looks after customer experience, like the marketing department or like the customer service department. This is a competence. We've got to become customer experienced across every silo in our company if we're going to win. Well, that's enough of the scene setting for customer experience. But what I tried to give you there was an overview that customer experience is a very pervasive and all-encompassing view of how we need to look at our businesses, how we need to get our people on side, and how we need to design experiences that our customers love and come back for. And to do that, we need a whole range of things. And I want to spend the next few minutes really talking very quickly around customer measures, around journey mapping, and around some of the things that we can be doing in order to get started. So the first thing is journey mapping. Now, I know many of you have seen fantastic, very pretty journey maps, traditionally drawn up around personas, and then you follow that persona through some of your touch points, and you have a good experience, you have emotional highs and lows on that experience, and you map out what that customer does, that customer type does. Now that's useful, but before you do that, we actually need to go a little bit deeper into what I call customer journey mapping, not customer touchpoint mapping. And customer journey mapping is really about identifying each stage of your journey. So if you think about what do people know about your business before they even do business with you? How do they become aware of your business? What touch points do you look after that affect their awareness? Maybe it's word of mouth, maybe it's advertising, maybe it's something on the web. But there are a whole range of touch points that will get me aware of your product and aware of your services long before I decide to buy. So when we talk about journey mapping in this context, we look at everything in your whole life cycle of your customer experience. Everything from becoming aware of your business, to starting to think about doing business with you, to doing business with you, to signing up, to then transacting and doing business with you over a period of time. Sometimes that might be one transaction. Sometimes it might be 12 or 15 or 20 years relationship. And how we deal with complaints, how we deal with issues along the way, how we leave, what happens when we leave, and what happens when after 10 years or 5 years we decide to come back to your company. So customer journey map looks at all of those things, and it looks at all the various touch points along the way. What it then goes and does is it highlights those touch points that are working, those touch points that aren't working. We validate those with customers, we validate those with employees, and you end up with, out of maybe 200 or 300 touch points, you end up with maybe 5 or 6 critical touch points that are not working for your employees and that are certainly not working for your customers, and having the biggest negative effect on their overall experience. Now we can come up with an action plan that just looks at dealing with those 5 or 6 touch points over a 1 year to 2 year period, because we know that anything we do that fixes those touch points has a disproportionate effect on the way in which our customers view us and their perception of how well we're doing. And that's really what we're trying to do. Find those critical touch points that if we gave them attention and investment, more often of time rather than cash, we can significantly change the experience. So here's a quick example of what I was talking about. Along the top, in the dark blue line, we have becoming aware, deciding to buy, being welcomed in the first time. You know what it's like when you end up going to a nice bank and then they welcome you with those big packs of things, and then they forget about you for the rest of your journey. So it's all about how we get set up. How do we deepen that relationship? Some companies have loyalty schemes. Some companies send special offers to people they know really well, who have, been valued by the company, etc., etc. How, when I'm feeling not so happy about things, do I recommit? Do you get me to come back to you? So we look at all of those things. We then talk about 3 key elements. The yellow ones on this specific picture are what we call pain points. These are areas where our customers are saying, this doesn't work for us. When we've got to get a copy of stuff to our broker, or when we've got to try and get to the broker's website, nothing seems to work. So the yellow parts of what customers then tell us of all these touch points, the yellow ones are the things that are really not working well. The green ones are the ones that customers are saying to us, if you get these right, it really makes our relationship work really well. So if you see how many of the touch points on this map are not colored, they're just a grayish color, we can see very clearly that we don't have to focus on everything all the time. We just need to focus on those things that matter to customers most. Now, the mission critical ones, and there are 4 on this specific screen, are the ones that are both moments of truth and pain points. And those we color in red. So customers have said, these are moments of truth for us. These are really critically important to us, but they also are a pain point. And therefore, they are red. So if we were working with a company around this type of touch point, we would say there are 4 key areas you need to work on. In the decide to do business part of the journey with the customer, the part where we've got to get the customer to really, really, really trust us. Yep, that reps meeting is something that's not working, and that is mission critical. So if we fix that, if we fix how that meeting works across the board, customers will stay longer and feel more inclined to go on to the next phase. So what I'm trying to show you here is we end up with a really great map, because behind each of these touch points, we know who owns that touch point. We know what systems run those touch points. We know what other touch points they're linked to. And the very interesting fact is when you do put your whole business down onto a single sheet, you suddenly find people in workshops, etc., saying to you, but I thought we owned that touch point. We do X, Y, and Z with the customer at that touch point. And you find there are multiple touch point owners around one specific touch point. And that often is a very good indication where some things might be going wrong. There needs to be a primary owner so that that touch point can be designed, delivered, and linked properly. So this gives us a very top-line overview and very useful for the whole organization because their fingerprints are on every touch point. The whole organization is represented on this touch point map. But more importantly, we've had the input of staff and we've had the input of customers telling us what's working and what's not working so well. And that then gives us a roadmap of saying, actually, there are 4 things we need to do now. So let's work in the first 3 months on one of them, and in the second 6 months on another 2, and in 18 months, do now, do next, do later, we've developed a roadmap of things that the whole organization can sit behind and fix. Now, what happened in an Emirates context or in any airline context is one of those touch points called the travel touch point was broken into these various steps. And the only reason I'm showing you this is to give you another view of looking at touch points. Because the mission critical thing is when you travel, you prepare to travel, you get your tickets, etc., etc. You buy those through the web or through your agent or a number of different ways. You travel to the airport, you arrive at the airport, you check in, you go through security. We all know that part of it where we've got to strip the belts off and the socks and really uncomfortable time of the journey. Then we get to waiting for the flight, boarding the aircraft, taking off, getting to the other side, getting our bags, leaving the airport, and then going on to our next destination. Now, when customers were asked about that whole journey, they used these words. They used travel to the airport. They didn't use Uber, taxi service, RTA, etc. They just call it traveling to the airport. At check-in, they didn't say, oh, well, it's passenger services on the front end and baggage services on the back end and sales and marketing in the front end. Customers don't talk like that. So what I'm trying to demonstrate by this is to bring your ecosystem to life across your business. It's really important that you use customer language. You use the word your customers would use. Because if you look at check-in, for example, on this specific map, you will find that there are 5 or 6 different departments that would work with check-in at an airport. All 5 have to work absolutely together to give the experience to the customer of a really joined up experience. The customer only sees it as check-in. So we can't say, oh, there are booths over there that you can do self-check-in and you can do self-bag tagging, etc. That's not what it's about. Now, what's really important on this slide, and this is really why I'm showing you this, is that what customers feel at various stages of the journey is also mission critical. So when we ask customers, what's the most valuable thing? What do they value most at the start of a journey? It's confidence. Now you say, what do you mean confidence? Do you know who I am? Can you find my ticket quickly if I phone your call center? Do you present yourself well on the web? Do you fetch me at home when you say you're going to fetch me at home? This is before my trip has even started. Because if you drive enough confidence in getting those bits right, I think I've made the right decision with the airline I've chosen. But what I value next is when I get to check-in, it's all about time. How long is this going to take? What's the easiest way to check in so that I can get a boarding pass and move through to the next stage of the journey? And so time becomes mission critical. So the sorts of things one would do is manage queue length. First and business class passengers check in at these desks because the queues are shorter and the time that you need to wait is so much shorter. So if we understand what the customer values most throughout your journey, we can start to design the experiences at those touch points much more optimally. So we would use words at check-in like, we see you've been in the queue for a few minutes. Let me see how quickly I can check you through so you can get onto the lounge. So you reinforce what you know the customer values most. And then later on in the journey, when you're waiting for the flight, you can provide recognition. So you could say things like, families traveling with small infants, please board first. People requiring assistance, please board first. People traveling first class, please sit in this lounge, etc. So you can start provide recognition. You can't really do that up front because I'm not, as a customer, ready yet for recognition, because at check-in, time is what I value most. Wrong time to start recognizing me too much, etc., etc. Really just wanted to make the point there that you go even deeper when you understand the emotions that matter. So what I'm showing you now on screen is an emotional journey map of times of tension for the customer. Customers say, when these things happen, I get really tense. When the car's not there, when I get to the airport and the queues are too long, when I'm waiting for the flight and they change the gate, etc., etc. These are real times of tension. So are there things that an airline and an airport can do for customers if they know those are times of tension to take some of that tension away? And the modern airlines and the modern airports are really working fantastically on these type of things to make the experience so much nicer. There are also a number of times of frustration. The flight's been delayed, the flight's been cancelled. They're also relationship makers, 1 or 2 points on the total journey, that if they go right, the rest of the journey seems to go right as well. But you can almost be assured that if you have a bad experience going to the airport because the chauffeur drive doesn't pick you up in time, that the food's not going to be nice and the check-in staff are probably going to be cheeky and the overall experience won't be nice. So if we can find in your journeys the 2 or 3 relationship makers, those moments of truth that your customers love, they start to forgive some of the other things. And then, of course, there are very specific touch points that, when you get them wrong, break the relationship altogether. So it's really important that we discuss mapping, we discuss the life cycle, the end-to-end mapping of all your points of contact with a customer internally. We look at that across the value chain. We also then look at that from a customer perspective, and then we look at it from an emotional perspective. Now, not many people go to the emotional stage, but those companies that do make more money. So my new mantra is that emotion and empathy is a new currency, and companies that can get that right tend to do better. Now let's talk very quickly about measures, because I think I've made the point to you about why it's important to map these various touch points. Now we also need to measure what people really think there. And the 2 measures I want to talk about, one is controversial, one called Net Promoter Score, but I still find it extremely useful for companies who haven't really started pulsing their customers' insights yet. Basically, the Net Promoter Score works like this. And many of you have probably filled in questionnaires that say, on a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate this experience? 0 being not so good, and 10 being great. And would you recommend us to a friend or family, etc., etc.? And then there's an open question that says, why? Why do you say this? So let me use a coffee example. I have my favorite coffee shop down the road. Once they gave me a satisfaction card, and it said, is the coffee hot? 0 to 5. Was the service friendly? 0 to 5. Is the ambiance nice? 0 to 5. Was the quality of food good? 0 to 5. And I would rate them on that. That's very much an internal measurement tool. The net promoter on the same coffee shop, I would give them a 5, and the why part of that would be because you don't have enough parking. Now, most coffee shops would never ask the parking question in a satisfaction survey because they think it's outside of their customer experience. But for me, it's the reason I don't come to that coffee shop more often. So for me, scoring it a 5, it would be a detractor comment. In other words, I'm not likely to recommend that coffee shop because, the why? You don't have enough parking. Now, the company may or may not be able to do anything about that. That's a secondary issue. But I think when you take your detractors and you take those people who absolutely love you, who are your promoters, the most important people in the Net Promoter Score are the neutrals. These are people who are scoring you between a 7 and 8 and saying you don't have enough parking as a 7, i.e., if you fix the parking issue, I might become a promoter. Or if you don't fix the parking issue, I might become a detractor. So many people who work with Net Promoter Score very seldom look at the neutrals. They just look at the number that you get from taking detractors and promoters. But I would say the hint here is if you spend enough time on the neutrals, these are people who potentially are going to become your promoters. And they often give you hints of what's not working in your business or starting not to work in your business that you need to focus on. Another one that's fairly similar is a measure called Customer Effort Score. And I'll spend just a few seconds talking about this because you and I know how difficult it is doing business with some companies. You know, the first bit is right, and then you've got all these forms to fill in, and then there are 5 layers of forms, and then somebody hasn't told you to bring a certain document with you, so you can't finish it then, etc., etc. So if you think about this from the outside of your business, how difficult is it for somebody to open an account with you? How many steps do they need to go through? How much effort do they need to put in to your process in order to transact with you? If I have a complaint about something, how difficult or easy do you make it for me? Can I find your complaints page on your website? Because they're normally very well hidden. I don't know who designs those, but they're very well hidden. And so we need to think of how much effort does it take to do business. And companies who are getting a net easy score, in other words, they are fairly easy to transact with, fairly easy to do business with, have a very good returns policy if something doesn't fit you properly and you take it back to the departmental store. Companies that get those things right and very seamlessly and not too much paperwork, they seem to do a hell of a lot better than those companies who don't. So another great measure when you're starting off looking at your moments of truth, and especially your pain points and moments of truth, is to look at how difficult or easy it is to transact at that point. In today's world where we've got such an incredible way of connecting to people, hearing from people, understanding what people do and how they like to do it, mapping your listening posts is a very, very important part of life. And this is also where QuestionPro can really help you. Really understanding relationships, understanding what's happening on social media. How do you turn something that somebody's saying on Twitter into a really proactive, very positive response? You know, I've left my handbag in this specific place, and before you know where it is, somebody else has tweeted back to say, we've received a handbag that sounds like the one you've lost, and it's at our customer affairs people. You know, we've heard so many fantastic stories about proactive work. So how do we listen and set things up to manage qualitative information, to manage quantitative information, to manage what happens at feedback per touch point? I really liked the way you did that today, or I didn't like it. And I'm not talking here about a little button with a red grumpy face and a green smiley face, because it doesn't tell you why. It will just tell you you've had 5 grumpy faces today and 10 smiley faces, so you think you're doing okay. But there's also 20 people who haven't pushed the faces at all, and they've walked out of your store and not bought anything. So we've got to be really careful too as to how we use this information and interpret from it. And remember, for customer experience to work, it all has to work. So if we look at some of the touch points, for example, back to the Emirates story, fantastic lounge experience. Can you imagine the effort that goes into creating new spaces, for example, in the lounge area on board the 380 top deck? Fantastic customer experiences that really push the boundaries in terms of thinking. A spa, a shower spa at 35,000 feet where you can actually have a shower and be refreshed. Now, are these gimmicks? Absolutely not. Because if we understand the customer experience, the longer the flying times become, and you've got 16 hours between Dubai and some parts of the US, as an example, or 14 hours from Dubai to Sydney direct, the key element to understand is how you manage fatigue and how customers can arrive more refreshed than they would expect to be if they were on another carrier. So all of these things are around enhancing the experience, managing fatigue, and creating great experiences where people arrive feeling comforted, refreshed, and ready to do what they need to do. But as I've said to you before, 3/4 of what happens at the front end has to happen with the people who have to deliver that. So making sure that your employees are engaged and have great employee experiences helps you deliver better customer experiences. So in terms of learning and feedback, we find that we do need to really be very dynamic. We can be today. We've got so much data being thrown at us. Interpreting that data is now becoming the issue. And finding people who can help us do that becomes really, really important, because the insights we get from that are very actionable. So remember, we've spoken about things happening on stage, off stage. We've spoken about mapping. We've spoken about measures. We've spoken about how you can consider building your roadmap so that you're not spending effort on thousands of things at the same time, but only on those things that matter to the customer. Remember that in customer experience, it only works when it all works. So we need to design experiences that are well considered and designed all the way through. And there's some fantastic examples of what's happening out there at the moment. So if we can help you with any of those conversations, and sometimes it's just a conversation with the C-suite to get them to feel more comfortable about making investments and, more importantly, using what they already have in their businesses to drive fantastically designed customer experiences that your customers love and your employees love delivering, then we have a winner. Thank you so much for your time. I know we've pumped a lot of information at you this afternoon, but I hope that this has been of use to you and has been enjoyable. And if we can help you in any other way, please get hold of us at TribeCX or through QuestionPro, and we'd be more than happy to help answer some of your questions. Thank you, and safe traveling on your customer experience journey. It's not all doom and gloom. There's some fantastic times you can have as well. Thank you very much.